we still desire books that are written by human beings. We still desire movies that have real actors in it. We still desire music that somebody has poured from their spirit and from their their heart and their mind and their soul. So humans still require that, and based off of that requirement, we're still going to have very human um, development. Now, we might use tools to make the music sound better or develop it faster, but ultimately, what we still want to hear is somebody who's emotionally connected to the song, and that's what we crave, right? Human beings crave a emotional connection. Hey, my name is Raj Puran. I've been with AMD 3 years. I've been in the computing industry in the semiconductor industry for over 32. So my role is I'm the director of business development as it relates to developers. So working with our software partners and strategic alliances and so forth. That's essentially what I do is, hey, what are you working on? How does it work on AMD, and how do we work together?
Oh, that's great. How did you get involved in AMD in the first place?
Oh, you know what? It was funny. I was actually at the competitor, and I got recruited, and I needed to change. And I love this underdog sort of story that AMD has, right? But they've just been really innovating, big champions of new technology, and trying to move as fast as they can. And so I really wanted to be a part of a story where you just really develop things that are starting to be at the forefront of the market, and not so much uh everyday stuff, right? It's they're really pushing boundaries and envelopes, and like more and more people are starting to become aware of AMD. So I really like that, kind of getting in that lower area and then watching the tide rise for AMD as a company. So it was really good to be in that spot and getting in there.
That's great. So, how did you get into tech originally then, if AMD wasn't your first place?
So yeah, I was I never wanted to be in tech. I always thought that I was gonna just be like a drummer or a rock star or something like that. I was doing music a lot as a kid, and I thought, yeah, I'm just going to be a rock and roll. And my dad, was like, yeah, that's not a career. Okay, so you got to pick something. And I had an uncle who was very much involved in. He was doing a lot of code development, and he actually taught it at a university in Queensland in Australia. And every time he came out to visit, he would drop some new computer or software or something in front of me, and it piqued my interest. And I remember writing my first little Visual Basic game when I was like 11 years old, and then when I was about 15, my uncle paid me gobs of amounts of money to write him a SQL database for his nuts and bolts warehouse company. Where they were doing everything on paper and facsimile. For those of you who are very young, you probably don't know what a facsimile is, but it's one of these things where it's like, we're using very archaic technology, right, to try and do inventory and things like that. So I took a stab at it, wrote him a piece of software. He paid me 5 grand at the ripe age of 15, and I'm like, well, maybe I should do this for a living, and that's how I ended up in technology.
That's fantastic. So, out of curiosity, so that was what, many years ago now, and now you're here. If you were to do that same job today that you did for your
Mhm.
uncle, what would the tech be like? How different would it be because of AI?
Oh man, I think you'd have a baseline, right? Where you'd start with sort of saying, hey, this is what you need to know about what's happening in our business. Namely inventory, right? So you give it a baseline of inventory. And then as you make changes to that inventory, the system would start to learn and basically start to do those things for you as far as tracking inventory, where it's going, and so forth. And then you're taking, back in those days, we did everything by hand, right? We did everything by hand. As time has gone on, I've been, like I said, I've been in the computing industry for 32 years. In 32 years, we've seen numerous amounts of changes where now, you've got things like barcode and everything else where you're just scanning and going, right? So your inventory is constantly tracking. Well, it's been in the past, it's still been a very intensive process in that somebody has to feed the data. And over time, we've created, hooks and data channels and things like that where all that data can move around. Now there's going to be a level of intelligence that sits on top of it through AI that will start to create trends. It will start to create, opportunities around how you sell more or create new things and where the demand is for your products, various things like that. I mean, without doing an actual count back in those days, you didn't know how much of a product you'd sell. You'd have to wait for the salesperson to tell you, yeah, we're selling more of, 3/4 SAE bolts, the 3/4 by 5 SAE bolts than we are, 1/2 inch or whatever. Now you can at the click of a button get that data, and you move faster. I remember there was a really cool phrase that came out, and I can't remember who it was, if it was UPS or somebody, but it says moving at the speed of business,
Yeah.
right? Our
Mhm.
demands as human beings have gone much higher. We want things faster, quicker. And so even that human to human capability of creating those things have changed, right? And so our demands are higher. And so we need systems to be able to support those demands.
Okay, so from what I'm gathering from you, it sounds like over the last 30 years, we've kind of automated a lot of things. We've sped things up. We've made systems that kind of automatically do things for us. And now with the implementation of AI, what we're going to actually see is it's more about analyzing that data and basically putting that data to use. Is that kind of how you see
Yeah,
AI
I
being
mean,
used?
think of the user, right? Today we have to have certain types of folks that help to analyze data, and then they have to package it to make it available for others to use. And even the everyday user won't necessarily, be able to understand that data or how it's categorized and so forth. So really what you have is this idea of agentic AI and these little agents that'll be sitting on your system, right? Or somewhere in the background, whether it's local AI on your system or in the cloud, somebody or something rather is analyzing data. And then when we verbally ask for data, right? I mean, you look at Alexa, these devices on your in your
Mhm.
home, even on our laptops, the various, Chat GPT, Gemini, all these things. When you ask a question, within minutes you're getting data, right? You're
Yeah.
not like, hey, I need a degree in data science to be able to mine this data out. It's everyday people being able to get access to information and get an understanding. Like, we want to learn and execute and do things very quickly. You know, uh, hey, somebody's coming over for dinner. I need to make X kind of dish. I want to know how to do it quickly. Yes, you can type it out and read it, but have you ever tried reading the recipe and cooking at the same time and doing all this stuff? It's pretty daunting, right? For anybody. Um, but when you have something that's assistant based, like agentic based, or even like what we're seeing with Alexa, being able to walk somebody through, that's all AI, right? That's all a level of artificial intelligence with some machine learning behind it to help drive that. I think uh, there are certain areas where it's just going to improve people's ability to execute things very quickly, because we are moving at a fast pace compared to back in the day. I mean, we're just having a conversation the other day about how we're moving way faster as a society than our parents did. They were like, yeah, if I figure it out, I'll figure it out. Now we're like, YouTube, AI, boom, it can change parts on a car that I'm not a mechanic, but I could do that because I have data available to me now.
That's great. So I think a big thing that humans have done over the years is analyze, right? Like
Mhm.
that's something unique to humans, at least up until now, where
Yeah.
we have these deep analytical skills. So with AI taking that over, what do you see our role as you have human and AI kind of coming together to do work? What is the role of the human in
Well, I
this
mean,
process?
yeah, it's a very controversial question, right? Because I think people are concerned about jobs being replaced and things like that. I mean, the unfortunate and fortunate part of technology is technology has been replacing something for a long time, right? So it replaced the facsimile, it replaced, writing things down. It's always been a replacement piece of innovation, right? So now you and I don't have to be in the same room recording this. We can feel like we're interacting because we're doing it through the internet and through, these complicated networks and things like that. But therein lies the issue. Whereas while you're replacing one thing, which is you're driving automation to replace mundane sort of mediocre tasks, you have to have a lot of other complicated things that make it work. So it's kind of like saying, okay, yes, we're going to streamline some things for everyday people, and yes, it's going to take over certain tasks, so we won't need as many people to do that, but we will need more people to do very, intense, complex situations, which opens up a whole new market for education and learning and types of jobs. But at the same time, machines just can't replace some of the very intuitive things. I mean, yes, I've seen I find it really fascinating when you can see a machine that can create mortar and bricks, right? They have these 3D printers for concrete now. Fascinating innovation. But at the end of the day, that's just one part of a bigger set of things that need to get developed. And so you need humans to pick colors and paint and all that. And people can argue that yes, you can have AI do those things. An interesting argument I was involved in was probably about 2 months ago is about art, right? And music. I mean, video, music, all these things. And it's like, well, AI can create these things and these songs and so forth. And I'm like, yes, the song is one thing, right? Writing the song is one thing, but we humans are not machines. So humans, when you think of music and art, we want an emotional connection to those things that we appreciate, right? Like now we'll be fascinated by, let's say something that is created on VO from Google, right? Where it's like you can create a 30-second video or a minute long video and put it all together and put together a short story. But at the end of the day, it's fascinating and it's intriguing, but it doesn't have that human connection. When we still desire books that are written by human beings. We still desire movies that have real actors in it. We still desire music that somebody has poured from their spirit and from their their heart and their mind and their soul. So humans still require that, and based off of that requirement, we're still going to have very human development. Now, we might use tools to make the music sound better or develop it faster, but ultimately what we still want to hear is somebody who's emotionally connected to the song, and that's what we crave, right? Human beings crave a emotional connection.
Yeah, I just want to play a little devil's advocate with that
Mhm.
because I think AI slop is a term that gets thrown around a lot, and like,
Right.
is AI generated content worth anything? I guess the first thing I want to throw at you within this context is, well, nothing AI generated has not been created without a prompt. Like,
Yes,
a human still has had to step in
absolutely.
and basically initiate the creation.
Right.
Um, so in my mind, like, what has AI created outside of humans yet? Has there been anything that you know of that AI has created outside of a human input?
I know there's been research done on the ability for AI to sort of, be self-aware and be self-creative and self-driven. I don't know that anything has been outside of research. I don't think that anything's been too successful. I mean, I think it all has to start from somewhere. It all has to start from a human prompt or a human endeavor. Um, when will that crossover happen? I don't know, and I certainly don't want to know right now. I think the biggest thing is how do we use AI to help humans do things better and be be more creative or be faster in responding to something. If you look at things like healthcare issues and epidemics and pandemics and things like that, is how do we use these tools to kind of respond faster and be able to get the faster solutions. That's all great stuff. But again, yeah, to your point, in order for me to start that process, um, it's human, right? It's human prompted. And then there's a refinement within that the humans have to direct as well,
Mhm.
right? So we as humans have to, so we say, hey, I want to go type in this prompt and get some kind of a prose, right? Whether it's a paragraph or a story. But I'm not necessarily going to agree with what the response is. I may like it. I may like some element of it, but I may not necessarily agree with it. And then I'll go in and make edits and changes and so forth. Now, the question is, what's the cyclical process of feeding that back into the system so that the system starts to say, okay, now I'm more aware of what's going on, and so I can kind of do it for you, right? Like
But
that'll
that's
be interesting.
but that's still prompting and that's still directing. Like you're still directing AI. You're
Yeah,
still
it's still
so it'd be
not.
like I guess it would be I guess I just kind of want to like go a little bit down this path and push you on this a little bit. So like
Yeah.
if a director is directing an actor, right?
Mhm.
That seems kind of very similar. Like obviously there's directors that do things that are unbelievable. You see performances from an actor with one director, it's
Yeah.
whatever. And you see somebody with somebody else and you're like that it's mind blowing, right?
Yeah.
Like it touches your heart.
Yeah.
Um
Absolutely.
and so I'm curious, do you see that level of ability that humans can interact with AI and get that kind of art or that kind of performance or that kind of creation out of AI yet?
I think it's very much going to be driven by, like you said, that one. Like if I'm a director, right? If I decide, hey, I'm just going to be a director because now there's all these tools, right? There's these different things that allow me to do that. I still have to create those tipping points, right? Like I still have to create the story arc, the ideas. How do I want to frame it? How do I want the ending to align with the way I would think? Because now you have directors that are like, hey, I'm going to take you down this rabbit hole, right? Some of the greatest movies I've seen on some of the streaming services out there is they make you think you're going to an end state, and you're like, I got this in the bag. I know how this is going to end, and then they just totally flip it on its head, and you're just like, I did not see that coming. That's great art to me. And so when you can get suggestions based off of your prompts, but
Mhm.
ultimately me as a director, I have to decide what I want to do to you as the audience, right? And
Mhm.
AI, I don't think is there today. It'll give you probabilities and suggestions. I don't think it's going to decide the end state for you. And I'm yet to see something that decides the end state for you, right? I think ultimately we're in this position of input output, and then the finality of that output is ultimately dependent upon the user, right? So when is that going to change? I don't know. I think there's a lot of research being done in that because it seems like a novel thing to see if machines can actually learn. And I think we have this curious mind to see if machines can actually do these types of things. But to my understanding, and talking to a lot of different software vendors that are working with AI and building agents and so forth, it's really a tool to help users do something better or faster or more efficiently, not necessarily to replace the user.
Yeah. So I recently was just reading something they kind of compared using AI as kind of like mining. So they were
Hmm.
saying like uh a lot of today's world, right, is all about curation. Like people are going out, like if you, there's so many like Instagrams and TikToks and things that it's really about like
Yeah,
bringing this stuff together, right? It's
right.
like it's not even like your own creation. You're either like commenting on it or curating it or something like that. And that's kind of what AI is. It's this mining of everything that's ever been, and you're kind of like prompting it to give you something and then it's giving you something and then you're kind of like I guess editing it down, like taking what you mined and like shifting through it and like trying to find those pieces and put them together. Do
Yeah.
you think that's a good way of looking at AI? Is it's more like a mining process that you're then required to take that those minerals and those things that you've found and then kind of assemble them into something more? Do you think that would be a good analogy?
I think it is, and it isn't. And here's why I say it is. It is because you do have a significant amount of the minerals out there, right? And so in order to mine them, you're categorizing them and putting them into usable, you know, capability, right? Buckets or whatever you want to call it. So essentially you're extracting it from the place where they exist and then categorizing it and then determining what to do with it. So that's very much, feeding into the machine learning side of things where you're saying, okay, here's all this data out there. How do you how do you categorize it and how do you put it into usable buckets? And that's where you get your language models and things like that, right? And you get your convolutional neural networks and so forth. Is because you've got to build all those things into categories. Then the inferencing part of that then goes and starts to say, hey, based off of what I want, I can go and categorize them even further, right? I can say, hey, what happens if I take, um, a particular element or a particular mineral and combine it with another mineral? Can I make something new with it? And then it'll look at all the properties and say, yes, you can, or no, you can't, right? So that's something that we would have to do a ton of research, lots of work to try and see if those things happen. But because so much research and work has gone into it, that you can utilize that effort to then categorize it and build something new. So this is like effort stacked upon effort, right? One of the coolest examples of things that I can recall in my days of working with various different companies is the Smithsonian Institute. They have millions and millions and millions of artifacts, right? Like stored that you and I won't see on a regular basis. One of the initiatives they took up was this idea of digitizing as much of that as they could and making it available for, as an open source type of thing, to make it available for people to use, teachers and institutions and so forth. Once that stuff is digitized, right, it's going to take decades for them to digitize physical things. But once that's digitized, you now have all that stuff sitting in archive, all that digitized material sitting in stores and archives and so forth. And eventually they can build a model that will categorize all that. And so now you can say, with the technology we have coming forward, it's like, hey, take an artifact that the Smithsonian has and make it come to life in its once understood form that it existed in, let's say 1700 whatever. And based off of all the data and all the materials, you can actually get an output that'll say, hey, by the way, this little thing you're looking at, this coin, was actually used during this time, and here's what it would have possibly looked like, right? And it's going, wow, like that was, I think that's the hope of everybody, is how do we use AI to generate the ability to then put that data into motion, into reality, into because today it's words, it's ones and zeros, it's metadata, it's bits and bytes and everything else like that. And it's like, how do we then make it tangible and usable? And that's where it would take a human forever to map all that out, build up what that landscape would look like, and then direct it and create a form. And now with an AI, you could do it probably in about a few minutes, right? Just depends on how much data is backing it. So
after you spend the years and years and years creating that data,
it has to start somewhere, right?
Humans still have to spend like this enormous amount of time to even get to that point. Yeah. Okay.
And then there's that tipping point. I think this is what people are trying to research and trying to understand is where is that tipping point where the machines become more self-aware and can start filling in the blanks, right? Because today the blanks that exist have to be filled in by humans as it is, right? So like when we say, hey, direct something for us, it'll create a piece of art based off of what it has. And then you're like, yeah, that just doesn't tell the whole story though. Well, it's not going to know how to kind of replace that element of the story. You have to still give it something more, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing that we're looking at with video-based AI content creation, right? The generation of video content through AI. It'll generate several parts, but then you have to keep generating more parts to then piece together to create a whole story. So I don't think today, in many cases, it creates the whole story. And there are people probably working on that today that can do that. But I think what we've seen with Google and other companies is they have the ability to create parts for you, and then you put the parts together and make it. So now instead of spending months, years, you can get enough put together within a couple of days to create a pretty sizable story. And then you can put out there. I think I can't even remember the name of it now, but I saw a piece of content that went out. It was on YouTube. It was like this, it was like a 15-minute content. It was all generated on AI. It was pretty fascinating. And I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was a big deal, right? It was created with VO and all these other applications and so forth. But again, there were pieces that got generated, and then the director had to put it together. And I think it took them like 15 days versus like, you know, months and years, right? So that's fascinating to me.
Is it kind of like one of the most impressive things you've seen so far?
I was thoroughly impressed.
Okay.
I was thoroughly impressed, but I'm thoroughly impressed by even Instagram Reels, right?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
I think I have some older friends, and I was like, "Hey, check this out," and they were like, "Oh man, that's pretty cool." I'm like, "That person's not real, and they don't
Mm.
exist, and it was created by a machine," and they're just like, they're like jaws dropped. Of course, they instantly go into freak out mode, like, "Oh no, there are AIs coming for us and everything," right? And I'm just going, "No, no, you're missing the point. The point is we can now, if you take a look back at what YouTube now represents, right? YouTube it's UGC, right? It's user generated content. And we're just suckers for user generated content, right? I mean, I know people that live on YouTube all day long. I mean, I tend to go there pretty regularly because user generated content is fascinating, right? Because it's moment to moment, it's real, it's being done by other people. But it's also opened an avenue for everyday people to utilize tools to become creators. And it's really about, hey, I got this crazy idea about a story. I want to put it out there. And now you've got these AI tools that allow you to go do that. Otherwise, what are you doing, right? You're calling up your friends, you got video cameras, you got, I think in the old days when I used to make Super 8 films with my buddy, right? We used to sketch out a script, in our bedroom, and like, yeah, we're gonna make this, like, action movie and this and that. And we grabbed the 8 millimeter cameras that my dad and his dad had, and it took us months to create a 2 minute stupid video that everybody just laughed at. We just had a good time. But the reality of it is now you can go tell a really good story, using these tools, right? It's just how much of a creator are you? How much creativity do you have oozing through your pores to be able to go do that and to go tell that story? So that to me is exciting. The other thing is fun watching my kids who love to sing but don't have a band. They can now generate a band, right? And do it in their bedroom and be able to create their own music and share it with their friends and things like that. I don't think that stops from discovering that next major artist, right? That next Chapel Rowan or whoever you want to come up with, right? That's gonna
Well, I think a big part
wow.
of that is live music
Yeah.
will always be, and also we always I the best comparison I hear about things like this is chess. Look, you want to watch the two best chess players? They aren't human. They're just not.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
two AIs. But you
Yeah.
don't want to watch that. And
No.
chess is just as popular as it's ever been.
Yeah.
People are still watching people play people. There's always going to be this thing about humans getting down and doing it, right? We
Yeah.
can drive a car at 300 miles per hour, but we watch people run. This you can run the fastest 100 meters. There's always going to be this desire to see humans, I think, create. And I think that to me is one of the best. I kind of wanted to go on ask you about this too. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions for me that I see right now is this idea that like these things are going to lose value, that like because AI is coming, that these things that humans create won't have any more value. They may not get as much exposure, right? Because there's obviously going to be more, but I don't think a human's creation is ever going to be less valuable because AIs can create something of the same value.
It's going to be, I mean, we're venturing on a philosophical discussion here, right? But I think some of this is very philosophical. I mean, you look at it, you look at the background of the turmoil of AI, it tends to lean on a philosophical, debate. But I think there's just, I've always looked at technology as a tool, right? Not a replacement. Yes, there's things that it will replace. As I said earlier at the beginning of this, was there's some things that it will replace, but it's mostly task-based things.
Mhm.
But it's not going to replace our desire for meaningful connections and meaningful exhibitions of human capability and so forth, right? Like, um,
Mm.
I am always blown away at how many people show up to a WWE match, right? It's and watching people just toss each other around. I mean, as ridiculous as that may seem to most people, it is still a form of entertainment that people just flock to. And yes, maybe one day robots will be throwing each other around, but there's not. You watch the intense amount of acting and other things that go on in that. That's what draws people, right? Like I mean, why do soap operas still exist on primetime television? People are drawn to like drama and intrigue and things like that. And knowing that there's a human element behind it, I think still pulls people in, right? It's the same thing with, when we go to a live venue and we're not wanting to see perfection. I think what we want to see is effort and vulnerability and things like that. When you hear somebody sing and they miss a note and they giggle and they keep going, that adds to the show, right? Versus like, oh, they're pitch perfect, they're this, they're that, and then you just go, yeah, that was, it's like, how much are you lip syncing? Like, what's going on? You know what I mean? So it's like we're drawn to performance and effort, and it's the same reason why we love the Olympics and things like that, because we want to see humans excel, right? There's just this natural desire to see somebody do something really amazing from a human perspective. You can program a robot or a machine to do something. We've seen that with Boston Dynamics and other companies, right? Is like they can program a robot to do something pretty intense. It's not the same as seeing, a star athlete catch a ball behind their hand, behind their
Mhm.
back. I've been watching baseball highlights all week because I love baseball, right? I've been watching some of these plays that these guys are making. I mean, it's an equation of skill, timing, luck, um, various different things. They're making these plays out in the outfield that are just mind blowing, right? Guys flying through the air and catching the ball. That's a human doing that. And so we are paying for that level of intrigue and drama and things like that. So I don't think any of that's going away by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think anybody, I think when you look at AI, you have to look at the tools that they are, right? And that is that hopefully it's going to make our lives better, in the sense that we can do tasks that we like. I mean, on a daily basis, I have to do updates and respond to emails and do things that actually I'm just kind of, it just bores me, right? It's just like,
Mhm.
man, I got to do this mundane task over and over again. And yes, it's part of my daily business routine, but I have to keep doing these tasks. What if I could have an assistant kind of on my machine that will do that for me? Hey, sign me up, right? That's fantastic. And there's companies that we're working with that are doing that today. What if I don't have to go tap, five or six people because I need a video content that I need to generate for 30 seconds and I need to do it pretty quickly. I can go on my computer, type in a prompt, have it connect to a Gen AI video, tool, and I can generate a piece of content and then put that into my presentation. Now I didn't need to go wait for 20 other people, and I value their talent, but my time's valuable to be able to get that done and be able to get it to, my customers and things like that very quickly. So I think when we look at it from that perspective, there's going to be all these amazing tools that are going to start to show up on, things like AI PCs and other. I mean, that's the big question that everybody has, right? It's like, what's an AI PC and why do I want it, right? And at the end of the day, what we're saying is it's eventually it's just going to be PCs, right? Yes, there's this new category of AI PC that's coming out today, but that technology is sort of it's gonna fade into what it is, which is a piece of technology. And we're gonna be so used to using it on a daily basis that we won't be going to each other and saying, do you have an AI PC? Or do you have this? Or do you have that? We're just going to say, hey, can you do this today? Right? Which is to create a piece of content and so forth. And so that's where the tools are going to become important. And that's where, it's up to people working on AI, people working on the software, people working on the machine learning to start creating the background for it to get easier. But the human desire for those type of things that you and I've been talking about, like, art and the drama and the intrigue and the athleticism and all that. None of that goes away. And I certainly don't want a robot cutting my hair, right? So I'd rather go to somebody who has that skill set and can do it right.
Definitely, I definitely get that. The so you're saying AI PCs essentially in the future. That's where everything's going. Everything's going to come locally. Because do you see it like basically? Because right now everything's on the cloud, right? Pretty much
Yeah.
most AI tools. I would say the majority of people use cloud AI. They don't use PC AI. So you see that being a major shift over the next few years is us going from the cloud to on your actual physical device.
Yeah, I think, I think there's going to be so many different elements to make that whole category in our landscape look very different, right? Today, it's very easy to deploy across the cloud because you can go buy an instance or go rent an instance where you have GPUs and things like that. That's where a lot of that, it's easy to deploy because you can build that code, put it on the on a back end somewhere, have it containerized, and then have it be feeding into. There still has to be a front end, right? There still has to be an app or a website or something. There still has to be a front end, which those actually execute locally. So there is an element of, yes, on the local device, there's going to be requests that are made and so forth, and those have to, but the heavier inferencing and all that is happening on the cloud. The technology is changing at the silicon level, though, in laptops and devices like handhelds and phones and so forth, right? What it's getting to is there's a whole other avenue that we don't really touch on when we talk about AI and the local device, which is privacy and security. So you have data on your device and you want that. I mean, you look at anybody's iPhone photo library. We were joking the other day that if depends on how your mosaic looks,
Mhm.
like whether you've just gone over the top or you're gone overboard, right? Like I had a friend of mine, he showed me his mosaic and it was like, I mean, David, it was like little pinpoints, right? And I'm like, you take that many photos, and he goes, I've been doing it for years. And I go, how do you even know what you have? My mosaic is big, right? Like you can see all the different apps
Mhm.
because I don't take that many photos, but he's more creative than I am. Um, Ultimately, that stuff does sit on the cloud, but how you interact with it and how you use it and make it available to others is all done locally at that device because you have to direct it. You have to tell it what to do um, to get it going, and then it builds from there. The same thing's going to happen. It is very dependent on the user, right? If somebody's just comfortable with using their phone, they don't have a lot of requirements on them on a day-to-day basis to use local compute in the 2 foot experience, like with the laptop and things like that, or a desktop. I sit at this desk that I'm at every day for almost 10 hours, right? And I'm constantly using. I have a workstation to my left. I have a laptop to my right, and I constantly use those. And it depends on the user. Now, when I leave this experience here at my desk, my phone becomes my data device, right? So I have this hybrid type environment. Now, there's some folks that, like my mother doesn't touch a laptop to save her life, right? Does everything on her phone. And if it can't do it on the phone, she doesn't want anything she doesn't want to be a part of it. So she has this need to do certain tasks, but she's not a super user. So for somebody like her, an agent that can kind of see what she does on a regular basis and make suggestions would be awesome, right? And that's kind of done at the local level as well because it's tracking what she's doing. Will there ever be an element to everything being at the local device? I don't know. In some cases, yes, but I think it's this symbiotic relationship between what you're doing at the local level, where the data is stored on the cloud. So it's always going to exist, right? That symbiosis is going to exist between cloud and local endpoint. But I think what we're looking at today is there are things we are doing and others are doing in the silicon to allow more computing power to go to very specialty designs, right? And specialty architectures. Today in our AI PCs, we have 3 accelerators built into the application processing unit. We used to normally just call them CPUs. Today we call them APUs, right? So
Mhm.
you've got the CPU component, you've got the GPU component, and then you've got the neural processing unit, right? Which is the new kind of accelerator that we're everybody's developing in the laptop segment. So our APU has the CPU, GPU, and NPU, and we're really starting to widen the aperture of the use of the NPU. We're starting to increase the fidelity of the capability of the NPU, which means that AI specified tasks, right? Those
Mhm.
inferencing agentic tasks can be written and offloaded to the NPU, which then does those very specific things in the background, consuming less power. And so when you look at the overall use of a laptop, when you're out in the field and you're using a laptop and those AI things are running in the background, and you can still do your regular everyday compute, whether it's doing creative work or whether it's, building a PowerPoint or it's, analyzing data on a spreadsheet or whatever. There's a symbiosis of all those things happening to where they're not taking away from the other, and they're actually sort of operating in harmony, right? So now you've got these agents that are running in the background doing the tasks that you don't want to do, so you can have more time to focus on the things you want to do. That is the future of AI PC, and that's the landscape that we're hoping will become the norm, right? So that one day we won't be calling it an AI PC. We'll just be saying it's a PC because now people have become accustomed to that being the way that we do things going forward, right? Your AI tasks operate in a separate lane. Your hard tasks that you do operate on the CPU or the GPU, and then your everyday things that you do is just business as usual, right? Because they scale across all those different accelerators. So it's going to be interesting. I think we're seeing some really exciting things come out. As we're working with various companies, especially around video editing and so forth. I know when I do, I'm working on an NLE doing editing. I'm still old school, right? I still like to cut and splice and things like that, but it takes forever, and it's the rendering, the cutting, the splicing, and really, if you got down to the meat and potatoes of it, it's really just determining where and how you want that to fit into the story, right? Um, Now this is where we can get really crazy about AI, where we can say, okay, um, categorize my media for me so that based off of what you're seeing in the clip, you can tell me where I should put that, or give me some suggestions, and then I can quickly drag and drop. And I think that's going to eventually change to where it'll say, oh, I now know based off of the way you edit something. We were talking about directors earlier. Directors kind of have an MO, right? A Ridley Scott is a Ridley Scott. You can tell a Ridley Scott film when you see it now,
Mhm.
after you've seen enough of it. I mean, he's got a design and an element and a way that he likes to tell a story. So imagine if you do that the same way too. Eventually, your system understands and learns and can say, "Hey, these are the suggestions I'm making for editing and arranging your media," and you can go, "Yep, I like it," and it drops it into a scene. Oh my gosh, fantastic, right? I can go,
Mhm.
I can go to production faster. I can go to end product faster. Things like that. So I think categorically the AI PC is going to change how people do things. Ideally, what we want it to do is become so second nature that it's just kind of natural, and you no longer, the technology sort of fades because you now have a capability of doing everything that you wanted to do. So to me, good technology is technology that becomes not in the foreground but in the background.
That's great. I want to do three follow-ups to this. Can you explain exactly the difference between an AI PC and a PC?
Yeah, so it's a good debate, right? Because a PC traditionally has been, yes, you can do AI on a traditional PC because you make use of this CPU and discrete graphics or integrated graphics. So yes, you can do AI. Um, this idea of AI PC really came up around, hey, what are some of the things that we could start to do differently in this new category of PC versus your traditional PC. And that was the advent of the neural processing unit, right? Was this NPU component that could be designed in silicon that um, was low power. It was designed to run certain data types and certain software. And so you can now write to that. Whereas, back in the day, we could play games. I'll give you an example, right? So analogously, we could play games on a CPU, but they weren't great in graphics because you didn't have good rasterization, you didn't have ray tracing, path tracing, all these different things. As the GPU has become more intelligent and more powerful, you can start to bring in higher order of graphics, realism, lighting scenarios, special effects, things like that, that you just naturally offload to the GPU. You just know that for that game or that experience to look better, you're going to have to do that on a GPU, right? So there's all this new capabilities with AI, especially around stable diffusion, generative AI, and agentic AI, that's going to happen by carving its own set of processing capability and power out. It's You don't want AI to be in the foreground, right? You kind of want AI to be in the background. That's what I think a lot of people are worried about, is AI is going to be in the foreground, like moving things around your screen while you're trying to work. That's the terrible idea of AI. So you want that stuff to happen in background mode, and it's best if it had its own lane and its own accelerators to operate on, because it would actually be more streamlined and be able to process better. Microsoft introduced Copilot, and the whole idea was really to make Copilot be a part of Windows, but it would operate on that NPU, very with specificity around the tasks that it would perform. And so that sort of sparked it. And then now we've got applications and application developers that are like, hey, I can make use of that accelerator, and I can do things in the background that will not impede on the user's ability to do their things daily. And that's where the money's at. That's where the value is at, is what can I do to aid the user to perform better tasks that's worth paying for? I mean, at the end of the day, we're looking at the advancements of AI and how it's going to affect business. If I build something that's going to make your life better, meaning that you're going to have more time to do other work, you're going to have more time to do maybe less work and more research and so forth, and those tasks can be automated, and I now have a system that allows me to move those tasks into an accelerator that's not going to impede on my regular work, meaning I can still continue to do other things and not have to shut a window down because it's utilizing too many resources. That is going to be where AI is going to go live. And I think that's where the sort of the future for us is go do that on the NPU, right? Because now you can do all your other tasks here. So that's where it differentiates today on an AI PC, is because you do have that inclusion of the neural processing unit in there.
So it's really the NPU. So what's the advantage of taking task and putting it onto the NPU opposed to putting it on the cloud? So you're saying we want this NPU to do these tasks. Why don't you just run those tasks on the cloud opposed to on the NPU? Because it's not using up your resources.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to marshal your local data and your local execution. You still have to marshal it to the cloud, right? You still have to go and connect to the cloud, tell it to do something, then pull that data back down to do it. There are numerous implications of why you would do it locally. Number one, to reduce latency. You're introducing an item that's supposed to drive efficiency. How do you get to efficiency if you've introduced latency by going to the cloud? From an equation standpoint, it doesn't make sense, right? So you have that element of it. So you reduce latency. There's security now. How do you make sure that an LLM that exists in a cloud is not going to use your data to then proliferate something else, right? So now you've got local LLMs that execute and are securing your data.
I actually want to say something on that. I find the biggest pushback with a lot of people I know personally is this idea of sharing your data with these companies that they just don't
Yeah.
trust. I
Yeah.
won't go into anybody specific, but there's been
Right.
numerous cases where you think you're in secure places and they aren't keeping that data and they're literally storing it and
Yeah.
mining it and using it, and they're keeping profiles on you. So I think that's like a huge thing that I've heard a lot about AI, and the idea of like how AI is gonna, like, if I use an AI system, that's gonna be used against me, or they're gonna be taking advantage of that. And
That
so
may
you're saying,
be,
go, sorry.
yeah. So that may be the single most, important reason
Hmm.
that I hear a lot of when I get into these discussions about AI, right? That may be the single most reason as to why you would do things locally versus on the cloud. Couple that with agility, efficiency, and then couple that with, you know, um, ownership, right? Like, what are you, if it's your creativity that's going to create something, yes, you're using AI tools to do that. What are you now giving up if you know, send something to the cloud that can now be held in the cloud space and so forth. So again, it's like there's going to be user rights and things like that that are going to
Mm.
come down. There's going to be creative rights, licensing, things like that. So I think we haven't even charted that yet, but we're putting so much out on the cloud. I think, and again, I'm not a big proponent of putting all my information out on the cloud. I don't think anybody is, for that matter, but we've kind of gotten to the place where it's become our norm. But I think the biggest thing is that we're people are saying, hey, if I'm going to participate in this thing called AI, how can I do that and make sure that I still have ownership of my creativity, my data, my information? So you do have security plus, user rights and things like that, use rights and so forth that start to play. Whereas if you build it locally and you use it locally, um, the idea is that you'll have that ownership and that's protected even in the security space. Like when I was at RSA talking to a bunch of security partners and security ISVs, they're saying, hey, we're trying to figure out the future of cybersecurity, and that's how do we use AI to protect against AI, right? And so
Absolutely.
sometimes that's not going to happen in the cloud. That's going to happen at the local level. How do we build those mechanisms at the local level so that, when I'm on my, you see people carrying laptops everywhere, right? And when they're
Mhm.
working or playing or doing something, how do they still make use of AI tools but have it be very secure for what they're doing? And so that's going to be sort of the next frontier is how do we maintain ownership through local AI, but how do we also protect it, right? And how to make it secure.
Yeah, so really it's speed, it's privacy, it's kind of keeping user, I think your almost personalization of your
Yeah.
content.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I've heard you say quite a bit, and it's something I've been reading about, like this personalization of AI,
Yeah.
how AIs will kind of adapt to you and kind of become like your AI. How
Yeah.
do you see personalization in AI in the future? What does it look like now? And do you see that evolving? How do you see that changing?
Yeah, I think it's what's the definition of it, right? Is it being defined by a company or software, or is AI really defined by you and what you want AI to do? I think the places where it's going to succeed and the companies that are going to succeed are the companies that say, "Hey, I'm going to give you a means and a mechanism, but you ultimately decide how it gets utilized." Right? We see it everywhere with, like, you know, um, the anonymity and privacy laws, and we went through all this stuff with the internet and who owns that data and so forth. So again, to avoid controversy, how do we make systems that learn from you and you alone so that it's becomes very personalized? I mean, you look at most laptops that people purchase on their own, how do they personalize it today, right? They put a bunch of cases on it, stickers, all kinds of stuff, right? Well, what about at the system level, at the performance level? How does it learn who you are so that laptop becomes your sort of friend, your buddy, your companion,
Mhm.
your personal, your personal assistant to help you do things. And I think that's going to be the wave of AI PC. Is if AI PC does its job to say, if you buy me, I'm gonna work very personally for you. I think that, man, you're gonna see people wanting AI PCs all over the place, right? Because that's gonna be the thing, is it's very personal to me.
This just instantly makes me think of the ChatGPT 5 debacle, basically, where
Yeah,
people had been working with this specific LLM. It was kind of tailored to how they liked it, and then they just replaced it.
yeah,
Right. And I just think if you were running your LLM on your AI PC, I have an LLM that I run on an AI PC, and I never have to worry about going away. And it does. Slowly, it starts
yeah,
kind of, I don't know how it does it, but it starts to kind of understand me better. I don't know if it's understanding or what it is. It's just like an autocomplete. The autocomplete gets more accustomed to me.
yeah.
So I definitely see the advantage of having my own LLM on my machine because it's never going to go away. It's never going to
Yeah.
change unless I
Yeah,
do
I
it.
mean, we're seeing that in the browser, right? Like you're now finding it easier to browse because the browser is actually helping you look for things faster. Because I can type literally a few letters and like something will pop up and I'm like, yes, that's what I was thinking of, you know?
Hmm.
Because I mean, I'm getting older, man. I'm 50 years old and I'm like, I wanted to go look at something on Amazon. I totally forgot 5 minutes ago what I was going to go look on Amazon, right? But
Hmm.
if it's based off of a trend that I was doing, it'll be like, oh, you were looking for this, and I just go, ah, thank you. That's what I need. It gets better over time, where it suddenly starts to fill in some gaps. And as we get older, cognitively and things like that, gaps start to develop, right? And so I think AI's got a huge opportunity to help later on with cognition and use and I mean, this is where we're all going towards, right? Is if we're going to embrace technology as we get older and we do technology, we also need for technology to be helpful in making sure that we're not, giving out our credit card information wrongly or
Hmm.
something like that, right? It'll say, uh-uh, don't do that. This is not a legit website. I'm going to block you from doing that because I'm looking out for you. It's amazing, right? It'd
Yeah.
be amazing if our parents would stop giving their credit card information to random people trying to exploit them, right? Because now the systems can detect that that's not what you want to do.
Hmm.
That would be great.
One last question, just to
Yeah.
wrap it up. If somebody's debating on getting an AI PC, what's the reason they should get an AI PC today? Why not wait a couple of years when it's more caught up? Like, what's the advantage of having an AI PC right now?
Well, you want to start somewhere, right? So we want to start with AI PC today because what it does is that AI PC and the software that's being developed by our partners out there today is creating that flywheel, right? And so you get that first advantage of understanding how AI, because you know what? AI PC is just a term if you don't understand what it is. And so by getting involved in it today and buying those units and being able to use them, you start to develop an awareness of what AI is and its capability is, and then it becomes less daunting and less fearful, and it becomes exciting to use that, and that's going to be the new wave of computing. So you're ahead of that. You're getting to that place where you're understanding and learning and moving forward, rather than saying, I'm just so nervous about using it today, and so you're missing out on some of those efficiencies and capabilities that's being brought to you today.
So basically, get in the shallow end now before it gets into the deep end.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, AI is one of those areas where start now, learn now, understand it now, and it just gets better for you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and thank you. I really appreciate it. So.
Yeah, appreciate the time.